Your search for unbeatable internet speeds is over. Visit Docomo Pacific today and sign up for as low as $60 a month so you can experience our fast, reliable internet speeds for yourself. Docomo Pacific, better together.
Saipan, Mariana. All right. Okay. Yay. Okay. Let's take one big breath together. We had a great workshop earlier, and let's just take one collective breath to prepare for this panel because I'm so excited to be the moderator. Okay. So let's take one big breath in and release. Okay, wonderful. Hafaday, Tiro, Kasalalia, Menko, thank you all so much for your presence and for your time as we move into our next panel discussion. And we're really excited because we're going to be talking about one of our biggest threats facing the Marianas today. It's one of the biggest threats, and it's also one of the most uncomfortable conversations that our community continues to try and have. And that takes a lot of courage. So my name is Sheila Jack Babalta, born and raised here on the island of Saipan. I was first introduced to this topic of militarization in 2019 when I was serving as a congresswoman. And there were plans for military activities, training and testing in the northern islands. And my goodness, my world changed. I was always aware of the history of World War II in our islands, and I was always aware of our participation in the armed forces, with all of us having family members, friends, brothers and sisters in the military. And I too was part of the JROTC program in high school. So I've had those experiences, but in 2019, my world just changed because it was a different perspective on militarism and militarization in our islands. And so today, we have a superstar panel with us. Yay! And we're really excited because it was very intentional that we have one representative from Saipan, from Luta, from Tinian, and from Guahan. Yeah. And we all know that the Marianas is more than just 4 islands, right? And so we'll keep and always keep the Northern Islands in our hearts, as the Northern Islands has been a catalyst for this movement and a direct target to this day for so much militarization. So we're going to begin by having each of the panelists introduce themselves and just share for 2 minutes what is their life like, why are they on the panel, a brief history of their story with militarization. But I think it's really important to give them the time and space to share about themselves and introduce what they would like to share with us this morning, okay? So we're going to begin with Layla Fleming Staffler from our sister island of Tinian.
Sorry guys. Thank you, Sheila. And I did write something, so I'll read some of it and add a little here and there to keep it under 2 minutes. All right, so I grew up, I know I mentioned that I did grow up on Guam. I did live in Guam until about 5th grade, and then I moved to the island of Tinian, where I stayed until I graduated high school. I was very lucky to get the scholarship after I graduated, so I did go off to college, but I came home right away because that was something my mom always instilled in me. Come home and give back to your island, and also because the scholarship said so. I made sure that I did come home, and at first I majored in art, and I wanted to work in the Arts Council. But, you know, I didn't understand government jobs at the time, and that was not available to me. So I became a teacher, and I taught on Tinian for over 5 years before I moved to Saipan eventually. I was raised by an activist mother. She was originally not able to vote during the Trust Territory time. She was 17, but she was an activist then. She went and protested against becoming a U.S. territory. She actually she was of the party and group that was against it, but she didn't have a voice then. But since then, she's always been active, and I've always had her as my my mentor and my motivator. I'm trying not to cry. And yeah, so she was supposed to be here today in my stead, but because she couldn't come, I accepted this invitation. Although I do not like this topic because of how much emotion it comes. So I will cry probably during this set, just heads up. Because of what Sheila mentioned with what happened in 2019 regarding the militarization that was trying to bomb Pagan and also do extensive bombing on the island of Tinian, which I grew up on, I decided then that I would become a filmmaker. And I didn't realize how much of my goal would grow, but I started first with a film about Pagan. My inspiration was to make sure that people knew the island, we remembered that there are lots of laddie stones on that island and they have not yet been studied. And if we allow the military to bomb Pagan, then we will never get to know our history about how we lived in the Northern Islands. So I started making films about Ghani and laddie stones. And from that, I saw much interest from the diaspora and people here looking for education, place-based learning resources. So I thought, okay, I'll keep making some. So I've made a film about Alamagan, and I recently did a film about Aguiguin. Because my funding source is out because of the humanities grants that are all canceled, I'm looking for new funding, but I'm probably going to try and do Rhoda or Guahan in the near future because I can afford that, not the Northern Islands because it's like really expensive. In any case, beyond my creative work, I've been dedicated to public service. I've been a teacher for over 19 years. I was a legislator at the same time as Sheila, which we had a really, really awesome experience. Right now, I am the Secretary of Labor. I will continue to serve the community in whatever capacity that my community will allow me to. And so I will pass on the mic. No, she is not here. My mom is Deborah Fleming. Biba, yes.
Biba, Auntie Deb.
She was the one who signed the papers to sue the Navy against the military buildup on Tinian.
Beautiful. I see there are so many similarities too that I'll share, but Inanusi, Maria Hernandez, I always, whenever I, speak publicly, I always carry on my shoulders my matriarchs in my family. I was also raised by an activist mother, activist aunties, and we just have such a I was raised with an example of strength, and so I kind of came into this work just being brought by my own mother to protest as a young girl. 5 years old, she was bringing me and my 5 brothers, and my grandmother was involved. My Auntie Kat, always got to shout out my Auntie Kat, who's really the fire, and a matriarch of mine. And so we, for 60 years now, since our land was stolen for eminent domain by the federal government for national defense purposes, my great-great-grandfather, from the moment his land was taken, resisted until the day that he died. Even on his obituary, it said, Ritidian original landowner. And so I feel like this is not like my work, it's through them, really, that we do this work. That I think I'm just good at listening. I'm good at listening and following the path that is set. And so I'm just really here representing my matriarchs in my family and all of my elders, my ancestors who have been doing this work for longer than I've been alive. And so, now here we are, our family is 60 years down the line, and we are fighting against a 700-acre firing range complex that's being built above our ancestral land. And we're so grateful to so many in the community. There are so many behind us who, like this community here, and so many others have stood with us and our families, and we wouldn't be able to do it without solidarity. And so that's why I'm so grateful for spaces like this, where we can all come together and strategize and build those connections. And I didn't plan on crying, but this is heavy. This is heavy stuff, militarization of our islands. This is a violence that we're experiencing that is not normal. It shouldn't be normal, but when you connect with Native communities, not only in the Marianas, but throughout the world, they're all going through the same things. Threats to water, threats to our land. And so, it's not unique, and that's really unfortunate. It's sad that we're all fighting for clean water for our children. I was part of an organization, in 2014, my family, started going to the public hearings against this firing range complex. That's how I kind of started to get more active. I actually remember talking to Minyaka and to our good friend Lola at the time. And I was a reporter for Pacific Daily News, and I was like, what's going on? What's happening? I'm reporting on this. I'm talking to my managing editor. I'm like, we need to sound the alarm on this. These are the impacts. Da, 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 da. But because of my job, I couldn't really speak out. And I remember Minyaka and Lola telling me, never mind, quit your job. And so I just look back on that time. I feel like, I'm so grateful to be in this community, in this space, and I feel like I've experienced a lot of conflict in organizing, and I'm grateful for efforts like this to build stronger ties.
Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing. My name's Zeno Camacho de Leongro Jr. I'm from the island of Saipan. Technically not born. I was born in Honolulu in Hawaii, but raised here my whole life on Saipan. I am on the board for our Commonwealth 670, which is one of the demilitarization groups here in the CNMI that are looking to raise awareness and do advocacy around militarism and militarization issues here in the CNMI. And I guess sort of my start into this, funnily enough, is like with a lot of people in this room, mainly Sheila Babalta, right over here, a lovely facilitator. When I came back from undergrad in Washington State, there were a lot of movement around amending our land non-alienation clause, Article 12 of the CNMI Constitution. And it really caused a big public outroar, just because out of the many issues that repealing that, article would do, a big kind of sticking point for a lot of people was who would move in if our lands were open for everyone to just claim, use, buy out, or do whatever they want with. And the big sticking point, of course, the elephant in the room was the military, right? If we don't have that strict protection of who can own land in the CNMI, then the military can very much come in, right, and do as they please. And we already kind of see, even with that protection, that they are still doing kind of what they please, right? So what more if that specific legal protection was gone, right? And so that's sort of how I came into the space. We, on Saipan specifically, and also Luta, we don't see the military in more visible and overt ways that people on Tinian and Guahan see, but it's I would say probably even more insidious, that we don't see it in the regular ways. We don't see active duty troops walking around. We don't have a full-on stationed military base here on Saipan. But it's still, the violence is still there. It's just in a different form. And I think a lot of people don't know the signs to look for that type of violence, that slow violence that's creeping into our lives every day and impacting our communities and our health. And I hope we can have a really open conversation about how that manifests today and how we can counter that for the future. But thank you.
Thank you, Zeno. Thank you, Sheila, and to the rest of the panel, Maria and Leila. Hello, everyone. Guahu Simona Manglonia. I'm kind of at a loss for words right now, recognizing just the gravity of this conversation. And I want to stress that while I'm here representing the island of Luta, I have been away for a very long time. So I am not the voice of Luta. I'm not the voice of the entire community. And I'm very new to this work. Sheila had mentioned 2019 being introduced to the concepts and the real harms of militarization. Mine was this year. While I was aware of the impacts and aware of the pervasiveness of militarization and occupation across the globe and in the Marianas, it was really at the beginning of this year where I recognized how crucial it was for me to not just be aware and informed, but to be an active participant, advocate, and fighter against the US empire. And I shared briefly the other day my story of coming home in March. It had been 10 years since I had left the Marianas. I was born on Saipan. I lived most of my life on Luta. I am a graduate of Rhoda High School, and my family comes from a background of public service, and I don't know why I was gone that long, but what matters the most is that the ancestors brought me back home in March. And at the same time of me arriving in March, there was a notice going around for a public hearing, and I put the air quotes because there wasn't much hearing happening at the hearing. And the hearing was right before my flight was to land in the Marianas, so I had to join virtually. So I think it was like 4 in the morning, I set my alarm clock. I still have mugu in my eyes, like laying in bed with one eye open. And I see maps and visuals. Marianas Press was live streaming the event, so some of you may have seen it. If not, the hearing is online and available for you to watch. With plans already in motion, maps and images and specific locations of development on the island of Luta. And as Zeno shared, we are fortunately at this moment one of the few islands that does not have an active military presence. So I remember shooting out of bed, thinking, not that I was thinking this would be, just another public meeting, but I remember waking up, I'm sitting cross-legged on my bed, with my dogs on me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to be alert for this. Ring the alarm, as Maria had mentioned. And there were elders in the room, and I'm joining through Zoom, so I can only really pick up what's being said on the microphone, and there were questions being asked about, what do you mean this is happening? Can you describe this more to us? Will there be jobs for our people? So it was very clear that this may have been the first time that our community members were made to be aware of these plans that seemed to be already set in motion. I then landed on Luta maybe 72 hours after that, and Fluffle was born, from Luta for Luta. And the name behind it, while it is quite long, is really the sentiment of whatever happens on the island of Luta, it's going to be from Luta and for Luta. And it was that anger and that fire and that passion of, you are not going to come here and tell us what you're going to do on our land, and that you're going to use these dollars to bring people from outside, these visitors to come, and you're going to pay them. And if all is said and done, and this does move forward, at the very minimum, what are we going to receive? And even that could not be promised. And I'm learning, I'm unlearning. I'm so privileged to be in this space with these other panelists. So I don't know all the answers. But for those of you in this room and those listening online who may be exposed to this type of conversation for the first time, I'm right there with you. It's terrifying, but we are so strong when we are together. And I'm really looking forward to some of the solutions and the strategies that our people are going to drive forward, because we are not going to let anyone tell us how we're going to be Marianas, how we're going to live, how we're going to breathe, how we're going to drink, how we're going to eat. And it starts in spaces like this. So Sai Namasi.
All right. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much to our panelists. We're so grateful for you being here and sharing your stories and introducing yourselves. We're going to continue with this panel and start off with our sister island on Tinian with Rep. Leila. And we have photos from each of our sister islands because visuals of the reality are so important. And so I'm going to hand it off to Leila to just expand on what's happening on Tinian, what does it look like, and how has this really impacted our relationship to land and water and air and each other. So let's welcome Leila once more.
Thank you, sister. All right, so Tinian. So I wanted to show you a little map so you can see what, wait, go back. So the covenant was the document that established these exchanges, and actually the document that is an attachment is called the technical agreement. And so all the details of the Tinian lease, including the Tanopic Harbor and the American Memorial Park in Saipan, are part of the technical agreement. It is available on the CNMIlaw.org website. But I wanted to just really emphasize that growing up on Tinian, there was only 10 square miles that we technically owned. The other 2/3 of the whole island, the red part north, are all military lease. Now there are parts in the middle that are considered like lease back for grazing, for cattle and such, and that is still in existence, although those have changed here and there. But the majority of my life was spent on 10 square miles. So living on Tinian, it always felt so small. Like Cagman, actually, where we are, to me, since I've been living in Saipan for the last 20 years, I've lived in Cagman maybe for like 15, and Cagman feels like Tinian. It's so small, it's like just this, small collective, and if you want to go anywhere else, you can drive out, but Tinian, you gotta fly. And if you see, there's the different hunting grounds, which is everywhere, right? You can hunt almost anywhere. Fishing grounds are all around the whole perimeter of the island as well. But in particular, the hot pepper picking grounds. How many of you love Tinian hot pepper? So the Tinian hot pepper is something that's really important to the Tinian identity. I mean, that's what everybody knows about Tinian from the Marianas, even more than the airfields that, where the Enola Gay took off of to bomb Japan. But the Tinian hot pepper grows in those airfields, and it has been a source of economy for many of the people, like in Rota too. They live off the land. Rota is even more so. And on Tinian, that 2/3 of the island was mostly accessible throughout the years because the military never really came. They would come every couple of years when I was growing up in high school, and they would do some training activities up north, but they wouldn't do very much else. There was never a lot of activity in the village. We would see them once in a while, but all their camps and everything were up north. Now today, I wanted to show some pictures of the airfield and how it's changing, because one of the things that's happening is the airfields are being renovated and restored. And I would like to comment that this was not ever part of any EIS I ever heard of, but it's happening anyway because it's a renovation, so it doesn't require that, is what I've been told. But if you see, so this was in 2024, and then the next slide shows January of 2025, and you can see how the jungle around the roads is being cleared. And then the next picture, this was just in April. I'm doing it from the airplane, so that's why it's hard to see. But you can see how much more of it they've been clearing. And what this is doing is really reducing the locations and amount of hot pepper that is available for the people who go out and harvest, which affects, many economies that we have. Because Tinian, like Rhoda, is very depressed with the amount of activity, which is often a reason that people embrace the idea of militarization in that positive side. But it's also negative in that it affects other parts of economy. And it's just really hard to accept. Next slide. Within the technical agreement, this is some interesting language that I wanted to point out. That one of the first lines in the very beginning is that it says, the United States may enjoy full and unrestricted use of the land immediately upon making the above payment. That was for the corpus that began our Marianas Public Trust, which is kind of like the Guam Trust, but different money source. But the idea is, if we give you this money, we can use this land in unrestricted ways. And honestly, when I think about the stories that I grew up with my activist mother saying, the military promised us all these things. They promised us schools, they promised us hospitals, they promised us help with utilities. And what I have taken back from that is our second language learner, the fact that we were second language learners, especially during that time, and the use of English has so many nuances when the specific words that you use. And that line alone is so scary to me, because I think about what's happening in Guam right now. And this line kind of makes me feel worried about the kind of doors that could be opened. The other two parts here are related to shoreline access and beach access. And it's always with the caveat that, depending on the activity, we'll let you use it, but if there's something else happening, we might not. And right now, with all the development that's happening, it does bring more worry about access to those spaces. There's a part up in the north that's called Tigit. Tigit has very unique, there's some, I guess it's maybe some seaweed that doesn't grow anywhere else. It's a special place. It's also like a natural fault line. But somebody keeps building a fence there, and the local people keep cutting it down. But it's like access to the fishing that's there, access to the sacred spaces. And these lines, although they permit us to use it, it makes me think about what's happening in the north of Guam, where you had that, but the access has definitely changed and become less and less, or maybe even none at all, and dependent on their schedule, and that's kind of scary. Next slide. Oh, okay. Well, I will stop there. Well, I did want to say one more thing. Okay. I did want to share just one last thought, is that growing up on Tinian with only 10 square miles, when I would visit the island of Luta, and I would be in their island, and while Luta is actually 6 square miles smaller than Tinian, I feel like I have body dysmorphia or island dysmorphia of my island, because I'm so used to it being just only this. And then when I go to Rhoda, it's like, it's so big, even though it's actually smaller than us.
Thank you, Layla. It's so important for us to know what the reality is, and to see these photos and to hear about the language and these agreements that are written in black and white that we are bound to. And the stories of Luta is a really great segue as we move to hear more from Mona and our sister island of Luta as we continue engaging, negotiating with the US federal government, many are very fearful to speak up, especially in public settings that are designed in a way that does not encourage community engagement and participation, and requires one to walk up to a podium or get on a microphone. It's just not very comfortable for many of our people and is not aligned with a lot of our cultural values in how we speak with one another and share our concerns. And so we're going to hear about some of the experiences on Luta and how Mona has really embraced truth-telling and community storytelling. And so let's give a round of applause for Mona.
So this image on the screen is from the public hearing, quotes, that was held. This was the second one. It was held on June 28th, I believe. I was one of very few community members to attend. This was very specifically a hearing for the CGMT EIS for development on Tinian. It was held on Luta. They held it on all 3 islands. It was all throughout like a span of 2 weeks. And I attended 2 of the sessions on Saipan, and I flew to Luta shortly after to attend the session there as well. So while the other hearings across the other islands were held, I think at like 5 p.m. or 5:30 p.m., the hearing on Luta was held at 3 p.m. on a weekday, while people were at work, children were at summer school, so no one was able to attend the hearing except for myself, a few of the staff that were present at this location, and I remember they ordered like 20 boxes of pizza or something of that sort. For who? I'm not quite sure, as there wasn't access to begin with to even be at this setting. I want to reiterate what Sheila had shared about, the fear of speaking up in these spaces, and just kind of going back to our conflict resolution workshop where we talked about the archetypes, and this really is requiring me to be a warrior right now, because it is a scary thing to talk about. Not wanting to, we have these political realms that really dictate a lot of the conversations and the family connections intertwined into that, the sense of respect and, you being in the younger generation and not answering back. And so this really is taking me out of my comfort zone. I spoke to a few folks right outside of this building because I was wondering, is anyone else coming inside? It's been an hour since the hearing started. And I started to ask a few questions to some of the community members that were outside. They may have been staff, I'm not quite sure. And I said, what are your thoughts? Have you seen the posters of what they're going to be developing on Tinian? And more than one individual, more than 3 individuals said, what do you mean Tinian? Why, this is the hearing for Rhoda. And I said, no, this is for the EIS, the CJMT EIS for the development on Tinian. And someone asked me, so what about the hearing for Rhoda? We came because we thought this was the hearing for Rhoda. And I said, there isn't a hearing for Rhoda. So even in just that exchange outside of this space of people, we don't even know what we're attending and which matter we're trying to address and which proposal we need to work through and the thousands of pages that we need to read. And I'll go to the next photo, which goes back to March, the virtual hearing that I mentioned. So you see the Mariana's Press. This is the screen cap of the virtual hearing. And as shown here, they had plans, they had their workload projections, their timelines, their maps of where things are going to be. I want to share verbatim, none of these are my words. They were direct transcriptions from what was said on during this recording, that they want to construct 8 concrete pads plus 6 military warehouses. Construction will be carried out entirely by military personnel. There are no plans for job opportunities for local workers. The Commonwealth Ports Authority will vote on the lease. Community input is not guaranteed in final agreements. There is no plan to improve civilian or commercial airport use, and there is no long-term economic impact for Luta confirmed or outlined within their project scope. Very blatantly said with very technical language. So if you weren't listening really closely, or like me, I waited till the end and did like the YouTube transcription so I can copy paste what was said. This is verbatim the words that came out of this hearing. And since March, there has not been another one. In that time, I have over like maybe 20 email threads between myself and I'm recognizing I'm a little hesitant sharing names and names of agencies, and I kind of want to combat that, but I'm also want to be aware of my personal safety. So I'm going to navigate that a little bit for the next few seconds, if that's okay. But I have several emails from very legitimate sources saying that the hearing that was held in March was a public courtesy, that it is not part of the NEPA or environmental impact process, that it was done out of the respect for the people of Rota, and that there is, and I have in writing, no legitimate plans or formal plans that any of this is connected to economic growth or opportunity for the island of Luta. I'll go to the last photo, and this may just already expose the organizations I'm working with. This was captured by the press. It was a very heated conversation during the June hearing on Luta about the Tinian proposal, where I was sitting by myself, minding kind of my business. I ended up propping up my laptop because there was no one at the hearing, really. So I was propping up my laptop, taking some notes, and a gentleman came and sat down next to me. Started inquiring about who I was. So I shared who I was and why I was there. And very quickly, a heated exchange occurred where fingers were being pointed at me. I was told that an individual wanted to get under my skin. I was told that I am doing activism the wrong way, and that there are other matters in the world that are more important and more dire than the small projects, verbatim was said, the small projects proposed for Luta, and that essentially like it wasn't as big of a deal that I was making it out to be, because at this point, I became very public on social media. So I have had a lot of posts that were circulated. What's really crucial here is the way this conversation ended was I was asked a question. So Mona, like in that tone, tell me then what we should do. What should we do then to make you feel better? It was something along those lines. I said, this is not just for me. And I said, but if you're asking my opinion of at least one thing that could be done, I said, how about we go back to March? Let's go back in time to March. There were several questions posted on Facebook that were sent via Google form that were not answered during the public hearing in March. I said, what if we start there? Answer the questions that the Manamku asked about, are you going to hire our people to help with these projects? There were questions about what is the economic impact, and the answer was, well, you know, if the military personnel comes, they're gonna bring their family and they're gonna enjoy the hotel and the restaurants. And that's the economic impact, you know, we're gonna invite them to bring their family members over. So this was in June. It's now September. And those questions have yet to be answered. I still have unread emails. It is my knowledge from my own research that this is now at the hands of the Commonwealth Ports Authority, and you may want to fact check me, but that is the last update I received. And I believe the line item on their agenda has been pushed back. So at this point in time, I don't know where this stands. And that's really terrifying. So this is kind of a call to action to those who are not as familiar with the development on Luta, that this is happening behind the scenes and we need more visibility.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you. Thank you, Mona. You know, the experiences with engaging in these hearings, reading the documents, it's all very stressful. It's scary. It's heavy, right? It's confusing, and it was all designed this way. It's designed this way, which is frustrating. You know, it makes our community angry, and just even more emotions come into play. And because of our history of militarism, and now we see militarization, and just for a moment, I want to touch on those two topics. Militarism and militarization sometimes is used interchangeably, but militarism is the ideology. It's your mindset that we need to have a military style of operating. And so we need to have military operations, or our police force need to use military tactics to keep us safe. It's this mindset, militarism. Militarization is how we see it playing out, how we see it manifesting in front of us, right? With the bases being formed, with the programs in our schools. We see it in physical form. And so our sister island on Guahan has experienced this for so long. And the process has been different for our sister island of Guahan because of our difference in political status. So we're going to hear from Maria on what it's like on Guahan and what strategies have been effective. Okay. And so on our sister island of Guahan, we're going to hear more about what's happening, what strategies have been used, what has been effective, what has not been effective. This has been an ongoing struggle for generations, as Maria has described. And so let's welcome Maria.
Pitos Masi. So in Guahan, we have been in the midst of a massive military mega buildup, but I first want to preface by saying that our people have never just lied down and let it happen, that we continue to resist, that there is strength, that our organizations have evolved to find solutions that are community-centered, and we are just trying to get really strategic about ensuring that the ways that we educate the community are not only impactful, but are generative. So we're trying to create spaces to educate while not depleting our people, because as Sheila mentioned, it's been years and years, generations, but more recently in 2008, when the agreement was signed between Okinawa and the United States to transfer Marines to Guahan, we were not part of those discussions. That agreement was signed by those two entities without any discussion with Guahan. We heard from national media that we were involved in this. And so from the very start, there was no consent. There was no consent from our people. And so we have been experiencing militarization, land loss for generations. About 1/3 of our island is occupied by the US military, which affects our ability to thrive. You know, that's land that we could be using for farming, for, you know, sustaining our families in our island. And, you know, instead our land is being used for military bases and parking lots and buildings. And more recently, the Camp Blaz was built as part of the buildup. We also have a 700-acre firing range complex that's being built in northern Guahan that many groups have been fighting against all these years. And there are, so far, as part of the military buildup, 900 football fields of our land in Guahan have been cleared for these projects. And we have impacts not only to families who have experienced loss of land, there's impacts to our water. Our northern Guamlands aquifer it's a massive aquifer that extends from the middle of Guahan to the northern part of Guahan. And this provides our community with up to 85% of our drinking water. And I don't think people realize, you know, a lot of the time when we do outreach, they're like, you know, we need to kind of educate the community even from that very basic level of like, well, what is an aquifer? You know, because it's a newer concept for a lot of people. They're like, oh, we've just been, you know, getting water from our faucets. Like it didn't occur to them like where exactly it comes from. So we're doing outreach in schools a lot of the time to educate students about where the water comes from. And so I think people now versus a decade ago, or even in 2008, are waking up to the realities of militarization. You drive in northern Guahan, you can actually see the clearings now. You can see the devastation, the destruction, versus before then it was all behind the fence. And so this is just a snapshot. The red areas on the map shows the military presence. This is the firing range complex, the 700-acre firing range complex. It's comprised of 5 different ranges, and the buffer zone, or the surface danger zone, which is where the stray bullets would, it's kind of a space where it's called a safety buffer zone, and it's where stray bullets would go if the targets aren't hit. So that extends 3 miles out into the ocean. And so we have a lot of people in the community, our fishermen. Manny Dueñas with the Fishermen's Co-op, the president of the Fishermen's Co-op, has come out and said he represents more than 100 fishers with boats, and they don't support this project. Our healers have been outspoken from the start about the rare amut that grows up at Latexan. There's a lot of amut that is for neni medicine, and it's hard to find anywhere else. And so a lot of our healers are really struggling with the fact that all of these areas that hold our rare plants to perpetuate our knowledge around traditional medicine, they now have to sign forms to access these areas. Just the lack of accessibility is something that our healers have been very vocal about. So there's a water impact. There's an impact to our traditional practices. There's an impact to our fishers who do not support the closure of up to, this is some of the most pristine waters in the entire island that families have been subsisting off for generations. And so our efforts continue. The Vertidian family started in 2014. We then joined an organization called Pritahi Latexan. That organization evolved, and now the original families have, we now organize under Hita Latexan. And so the efforts continue. We are still fighting. We're not lying down. We're trying to raise awareness about the impacts through a congressional visit to DC later in the year. We're moving forward with a lot of different actions in solidarity with so many other groups that are here today. We also are in the midst of just learning about all of the impacts of the 360-degree missile defense system that's being proposed in Guahan at 16 different sites throughout the island. There are about 250 acres of land that are proposed to be cleared. It's an $8 billion project, so a lot of companies are benefiting from the destruction of our lands. And so this is something that our community needs to be centered in providing input. Our governor, even our governor has come out and said, you know, where's the environmental analysis to understand what are the impacts to our land, and her concerns are not being heard. And so if our highest ranking official doesn't even have a say in how these projects move forward, then the arrows always point back to our political status as the reason why that we are not able to put a stop to these projects that harm our lands and waters. And so it's always about decolonization. That's the goal. We need to be able to exercise our inherent right to self-determination. Masi.
Thank you, Maria. Whew. There's so much happening. Oh goodness, I'm supposed to be the moderator. And when I see maps of our sister islands like that, where they draw all over her, like she's not a living being, that really impacts our soul and our spirit at a level that we have yet to even become aware of. And so that's something that I just wanted to share, and thank you for bringing to the group today. With all of this happening in our Marianas, we speak so much about protecting our land and protecting our water, our airs for future generations, right? We say it all the time as a culture, as a community, and sometimes there's a gap there on taking action. If you really mean what you say, what are you doing about it for our future generations, for our children? And Zeno is a really great example of someone who bridges this gap. He's currently vice principal at one of our schools here on Saipan. He actively educates his students, brings in outside perspective to share with the students who are our future leaders on what's happening, because the more we can have the dialogue, the more we can make the connections on how this is impacting our lives, how we are playing a huge role in war and in destruction of our earth. The more we can make those connections and become aware at an earlier stage in life, then the more hope, right, there will be for all of us. And so we're going to hear more from Zeno about just the future, what it looks like, what some alternative dreams look like from our youth, and his experiences around working with our future generation. Let's welcome Zeno.
Thank you, Sheila. And so I guess to start with our youth, because I think our youth are so precious to us, our nennies are so precious to us, and the environment that we surround them with and the things that they interact with and are exposed to have a real impact on them, the children themselves, and also just the future of our islands, because they are the future, whether we like it or not, right? They are our future. And so the two images I'll highlight over here, going back and forth, this was a recent event on Saipan, and it was given I really don't like the name, but it was called Pet a Jet, right? And we can talk all day about unpacking sort of the naming of that event. But more or less, it's bringing families in our community to sort of look at sort of these military sort of grade equipment, weapons of war. I'll just call them what they are, right? And this is all part of the process, right? Where our youth, our community, and our family on Saipan, where we don't really see this very often, right? We don't see active military personnel. We very rarely see sort of, every so often we will hear military planes take on and off, over our islands, even close to our homes sometimes. But this is all part of the militarization process of desensitizing us to violence or these instruments of violence, right? And we're exposing our kids to this, right? And they're growing up thinking that having these jets in our backyard, hearing them on a daily basis is normal. It's not normal. I just want to reiterate for everyone, this is not normal, right? This is not what our islands were when our ancestors came here thousands of years ago, right? And, firmly, it's not what our islands should be thousands of years from now on, right? This is not normal, right? And I will say, because I know there will be people thinking about how we up here are indoctrinating the children, making them quote unquote woke, right? But what I've learned in my years of education is that, I approach my teaching of these issues by just giving the kids the straight up facts. Here's what's happening, right? The who, what, when, where, right? And the questions that over the years these kids have come up with, it's always, why are they here? Why do they need to be here, right? And I always tell them, I don't really have a good answer for you. I have my own personal answer, and I really, preface that this is my opinion, and I don't expect them to share it because, they need to come up to their own opinion because that's really important. That's, that little moment of self-determination for themselves, right? That sometimes even our own islands, right, especially Guahan, that collectively we don't have that big act of self-determination. But it all starts with ourselves. And I remind my kids that on a daily basis, that it's choosing for yourself what your values are and what you believe in. But it's events like this that knowingly or unknowingly shape our values and what we think is normal. And again, I'm going to say this is not normal, right? And the last picture I'll show, this was all the military personnel that were coming in for the recent trainings that were happening. I'm forgetting, was it Cope North, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? And this was framed in our community as a huge win for the economy, right? Now, I haven't looked at numbers, I'll be very honest, and I'm willing to be educated on what those economic impact numbers were. But here's the thing, they're gone. They're not here, right? That is not sustainable economic growth, right? And so to rely on this, and we're not even, when we talk about the economic impact or growth that this brought to our local businesses, which I know some of them do appreciate, and that's okay, I understand, right? But where is the reporting on the costs that this did to our environment, right? I don't know, right? It's unknown, right? It's not really well studied, or even, I would say, probably well documented, right? So we're gonna, champion that this has a lot of economic opportunity and growth for our islands, and we're gonna, market that and report on that. But let's look at this on both sides. What is the cost as well? And so that's what I want to share right now. Thank you.
Wow, amazing, amazing time together. We will not be opening the floor for questions because we're going to move into lunch, and we're trying to keep track of our schedule today. But let's thank our panelists for an amazing time together. And please feel free to ask them questions during lunch, to sit with them. If any feelings or thoughts came up that you'd like to share. Please, let's encourage to do that during lunch.
Your search for unbeatable internet speeds is over. Visit Docomo Pacific today and sign up for as low as $60 a month so you can experience our fast, reliable internet speeds for yourself. Docomo Pacific, better together.